how could he say that the vice president is not important when Mike Pence was his vice president and helped save our democracy?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like
that's how dumb he is.
Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, and the other ladies on The View weighed in on comments that Donald Trump made recently, saying that he doesn't think that the vice president is all that important. As is usually the case with The View, they weren't happy with Donald Trump with these comments. Let's take a look at what they said.
It's crazy.
It's also kind of rich for him to argue it doesn't matter because he arguably won in 2016 because Mike Pence helped boost him with evangelicals. He needed to pick somebody who had even the slightest bit of appeal with moderates and independents, and he did not do that with JD Vance.
He went the other way.
He's the first VP nominee to have a net negative favorability coming out of his convention, and it's gone down since. He came out with -6 points. Now it's -15.
Yeah.
This is the guy who calls us, childless cat ladies. And the thing with him is there was no vetting clearly because there will be even more tapes of him saying crazy, polarizing, divisive things.
And weird things.
And weird things.
That was like 2 years ago. But I said.
But how could he say that the vice president is not important when Mike Pence was his vice president and helped save our democracy?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like
that's how dumb he is.
But I would also
He's
say
not
that
smart.
when we watch Vice President Harris as she enters this and who she's looking at all moderates and centrists. And I said that's a brilliant move, not only because I happen to be more of a centrist, but because when you look at the voting population, that's actually where the majority of Americans lie. Mm-hmm. And Trump doubled down by picking someone more extreme than him. So to me, they're both speaking to you through the way they're looking at their vice presidential picks.
Yeah, look, let me see how I couch my points.
Okay. Careful.
JD Vance. Okay.
I'm going to stop here for just a second before Anna Navarro gets too deep into this. So this video on The View was recorded before Kamala Harris had made her pick. But with JD Vance, when Donald Trump and his campaign picked JD Vance, they were way ahead and Joe Biden was the nominee. And it really looked like Joe Biden was the nominee still for president on the Democratic side. And it looked like Donald Trump had it in the bag. So there probably wasn't too much concern about who they'd pick as a vice president. And let's face it, I mean, Donald Trump has a point that the vice president doesn't really matter that much. People are actually voting for the president. Now, if a bad pick is made for the vice president, that can drag the presidential candidate down. And like they're saying here, so far, JD Vance's polling numbers are not great. He's not looking all that popular, and he's had lots of controversy with the cat lady comments and all of that. So it remains to be seen if Donald Trump made a good pick in JD Vance, but he is right that the vice president doesn't really matter that much. People are voting for the president, especially people who are Trump supporters, I would say. They don't really care that much about the vice president. They're there for Trump, and Trump knows that.
So I think that if JD Vance was one of Trump's wives, he would have already cheated on him. Because he has been a disaster from the get-go. As Alyssa just said, there's usually a honeymoon period after the convention, and he has had zero. And it's been on both sides, because on the one hand, he's antagonizing cat ladies, calling childless people sociopaths, and on the other hand, there's all of this information that has been released of the things he said about Trump, on him saying that he hated the police. So I think,
and then he called Trump America's Hitler.
Yes, he did. Neither of the sides.
That's hard to come back from.
So honestly, Kamala Harris, I think, needs to pick somebody that does not hurt. I think most people don't vote on the vice president unless it's a really bad vice president, and then that does hurt. I mean, but at this point, Kamala could pick Trump's friend, Hannibal Lecter, and it would be better than JD Vance.
But didn't basically Trump pick Vance because he knows that he would not certify the election the way Pence did?
He would certify.
He would not. He would not certify.
I think that's
the way
part of
Pence
it.
did.
I think he's a yes person. I think he wanted to make sure that someone would fall in line and not do the right thing like Vice President Mike Pence did. And I also think he just had the hubris not to pick well or vet well because he figured he had it in a landslide.
Everything in life is timing. And, you know, when he made
He also
this
kissed
choice.
his butt bigger than the other
Yeah,
guy.
that's
the other
what
one.
we
Remember, he made this choice after Biden's disastrous debate
Right.
and after the assassination attempt.
So he's full of himself.
So he was riding high because I think if he had felt more pressure, he might have looked at Nikki Haley. He might have looked at Marco Rubio. There were a lot of people pressuring him to do that.
Yeah.
But he wanted the sycophant of sycophants. And you know, this is what happens, folks, when you take Donald Trump Jr.'s advice. You end up with
That's
J.D.
right.
Vance.
And Eric, but you know what? The other vice president that mattered, I think, was Sarah Palin. That was a very...
A lot of people did not
that-
vote for John McCain because of her.
Sarah Palin. So for
Yes.
for the presidential nominee on the Republican ticket to say, the vice president he doesn't have to be ready on the first day, should scare Republicans.
Well,
But it
not a
doesn't
ringing
seem to be
endorsement.
doing anything.
But also, a lot of these sort of protest voters in Republican primaries are national security voters. They're people who back Nikki Haley because they care about things like supporting the war in Ukraine. JD Vance is to the far right of Donald Trump on that. He literally said, I don't really care what happens in Ukraine while Ukrainians are being slaughtered. So I think that a lot of those disillusioned, exiled Republicans are looking to who Kamala Harris's VP pick is. If it's someone like a Josh Shapiro, who they see as moderate, I think a lot are going to hold their nose and vote for a Democrat at the top of the ticket and vote for Republicans down below.
Or a Mark
But are there
Kelly.
any that aren't moderate? Because everyone I've seen so far looks pretty moderate.
I think the Mark Kelly, the Josh, she really is leaning into that. The only one I don't agree with is Tim Walz, mostly because I think she'll win the state outright. And I
Uh-oh, kind of wrong, kind of bad there on Alyssa Farrah Griffin. She definitely didn't make the pick that Kamala Harris went with in Tim Walz. She thought he was the worst one, and maybe she still thinks that she was the worst, or maybe Alyssa Farrah Griffin still thinks that is the worst pick.
I think he is seen as more left among
But
moderates.
historically, it doesn't really make a difference. You don't win the state because of the
Well,
vice president.
Shapiro is more
You know,
popular
because
than
a lot
Trump.
of people are saying, "Oh, pick Shapiro because then you'll get Pennsylvania." That doesn't make sense.
He is more popular than Biden, Harris, and Trump in Pennsylvania. He has a 60%.
In Pennsylvania?
Yeah, but we're trying to.
all you're needing.
Pennsylvania is the most
Pennsylvania
liberal.
is-
Well, you mean
it's one
to
of
tell
the
me
most
that?
important
So, people,
swing
is anybody here from Pennsylvania? No.
No, but in
Oh, okay.
There goes
Pennsylvania.
there's one person right there.
There's a couple of
I
people.
saw a couple.
I would bet you they're not going to vote for the president because the vice president is from Pennsylvania. They're
Oh, I
going to
don't
vote
know
who they
about
I
vote
that
for.
actually think it'll have a
Really?
I think historically, when you have a very popular figure from a certain state, it's not a guarantee, but you are definitely playing your cards right.
Well,
I
listen,
guess.
I think he
arguably
would
the
be
most
great,
important
can't tell you
state for
the
If she
truth.
gets if Kamala Harris gets Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and let's say
Michigan. She wins the whole thing. That she just needs those three to
Hands
win.
down.
How's she
Because of
doing
the
in those
population
other
of the
states?
states. She's doing well in
She's doing
Michigan
very
and
well.
Wisconsin.
She is.
Pennsylvania is where she needs to make
It's
up some ground.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
All right.
As we know, Sunny Hostin, Joy Behar, these other women on The View, they do not like Donald Trump, so they're biased against him. Whoopi Goldberg wasn't on this episode today, but I feel like Joy Behar was correct with what she was saying in terms of Kamala Harris not picking Josh Shapiro just to win Pennsylvania. And obviously that was the strategy that the Kamala Harris team went with because they didn't pick Josh Shapiro. They picked Tim Walz. But I also think that Joy Behar and Sunny Hostin are correct that Donald Trump went with JD Vance because he thought it was in the bag. He thought he could pick anybody and it didn't really matter. And it remains to be seen. You know, this is going to be a close race. So Donald Trump can definitely win with JD Vance. I think Sunny Hostin and Joy Behar are also correct when they brought up Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin really hurt John McCain when he was running against Barack Obama. So a vice presidential pick can hurt a president somewhat. I don't think they really help them a whole lot. But as Donald Trump said, ultimately it comes down to the person at the top of the ticket. The people who are going to vote for the Trump JD Vance ticket, they're there for Donald Trump. They probably don't care that much about, some people I'm sure think JD Vance is great, but they're really there for Donald Trump more so than the team of the ticket. So I think Joy Behar and Sunny Hostin and the others, despite their hatred of Donald Trump, they actually make some points here that are correct. So we'll see what happens in this election. But what do you think? Do you agree at all with anything that Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, the other ones the other ladies here on The View had to say about Donald Trump and his notion that vice president doesn't really count. Make sure to leave a comment for me. Make sure to like and subscribe. That helps me to grow the channel. If you want to see more content like this, I'll see you in the next one.